Happy June 3rd, and welcome to Acme Canine's Coffee Chat. Today we have a couple things we're going to talk about. One is we have an interview that I did with Pet Radio, KSCO Pet Radio, a couple Sundays ago with Dr. Kelly Deal. She is the Senior Director of Science and Communications there. So we're going to have a chat with her about titering and vaccination, when you should do it, and she gives some tips. She's been a veterinarian for quite a long time, and Morris Animal, she does a lot of research, so you'll learn some good things from her. Also, we have another interview, and I wanted to share a book with you because I really felt that it's a good book. It's called Griffin's Heart, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And we had an interview with actress, singer, and author Reagan Pasternak, and we're going to talk with her a little bit. She's going to give some tips and advice on pet grieving and when to get a new pet and how to handle things and how to talk to people when they do lose a pet, because your heart goes out to them, but sometimes you just don't know what words to say. So she's going to share some information on that. Excuse me. Before we get to that, this June is Pet Preparedness Month. Now, I first learned about pet preparedness on KSCO Pet Radio because it's based in Santa Cruz, California. And as you know, California gets a lot of wildfires as well as earthquakes. And so we talked a good deal about a pet go bag and the importance of this. And I think it's something that everywhere else, I don't think people think about it as much as in California, but it's a very important thing to have. And one of the things is the Homeland Security site has some great pamphlets that you can get. You can download them, or they can actually send them to you. And it has an emergency supply list as well as things to think about with your pet. The website is www.ready.gov. And when you think about a go bag, you want to think about medications that your dog may need, or food that they need, just things that would make them feel comfortable. And you want to have this in a bag so that should something happen, it's not like you're searching all over the house. What if you had a fire? You want something that you could just take and go, and you're going to be okay. But one of the things about it is that they can get outdated, and you want to make sure that, and I would say June would be a great time to remember this, is you want to keep up on medications. Are they outdated? Do you need to get some more? Medical information, pet information. Has your address changed, or phone number? You also want to have enough food for a few days. Things to clean up after your dog. You want a leash in there, a collar, and the big thing is, you have to you want to take a picture of you and your pet just in case you get separated, because now you have that proof in your hand that this truly is your dog, which is so important because, oh my gosh, there's nothing worse than having to say, that's my dog, and they're going, well, how do you know? And right there, the selfie with your dog is perfect, and just keep that on your phone. So June is Pet Microchip Awareness Month. And what I like to think about with microchips is that just like you're updating your records for pet preparedness, how many of you have actually went back and since you've gotten that microchip for your dog, gone back and make sure that the information that's being contained there is actually up to date and the right stuff. So I would say, here's kind of a tip. How we change batteries every time there's a time change, spring and fall. Think about June as the time to kind of review all this information, update your go bag, make sure everything's right for it, and also your pet microchip. You want to make sure that is up to date and has all the right information. I didn't know this, but there are a couple free sites for registering your dog's microchip, and I've listed them here on you'll see it on the slide next, so that you can actually register your dog, make sure you have the microchip number, but you don't have to worry about paying for this. A lot of the places that you may get your microchip from, they start charging you, it's minimal, like $10 a year or something like that. But these are free sites, work great, and your vet or the shelter will scan the microchip and be able to know exactly the information that they need. As I mentioned earlier, I had the opportunity to interview Dr. Kelly Deal of the Morris Animal Foundation. And I want to explain what the Morris Animal Foundation is, and it's not Morris the cat. There's a Dr. Morris, and he was a veterinarian, and he decided that there's so much we can learn from animal health that can help human health and other animals too. So the Morris Animal Foundation is about animal health, and they want to advance animal health by funding research that benefits animals everywhere. So they have a few great things. One is they do quite a bit for dogs, but they also work on cats, horses, and wildlife. They worked in Australia. They've worked pretty much all over the world trying to find out different things, like fires in Australia. How do the animals come back? Well, that could help animals in California or other places where we have fires. So it's kind of this communal benefit to all veterinarians, and they've extended it out now to pet owners. And there's some wonderful podcasts on there about all sorts of things. So you may want to check out Morris Animal Foundation, and great place to learn things. But one of the things I did was ask Dr. Kelly Deal her thoughts about titering and vaccines. So often you hear this thing about over-vaccinating, but what is it really about, and when should you do it? And I mean, not when should you over-vaccinate, but when should you titer? Because it was pretty expensive, but now it's getting less expensive, and it is a good option for pets that have health issues, older pets, that type of thing. So here's what she had to say.
Taking my dog, my personal dog, to a friend of mine who's a general practitioner that practices very close to me. And sometimes it's always easier to go into someone you know and have them kind of give an assessment of your pet. And so I'm going in, and I have an older dog, and who's been vaccinated a couple times, the rabies under her belt over the year. She's had her distemper parvo combination a couple times, but she's due. And I'm thinking, like, does she really need a vaccine? Do I want to do a titer? Do I want to do a vaccination? And so it was kind of a timely topic for me to look as well, and also see what's kind of being recommended and find some resources. Here's my thoughts on titering. Here's what I did in practice. But, I'm 10 years out from practice, and I got to take my dog in. What's new out there? Because we can't always know everything unless, like, again, we just looked at it yesterday. So I was like, I wonder what people are talking about. And it's kind of the same stuff that I think we know. First, just to get it off the board, I think right now there are really not good titers for cats. So we can take cats off the table, unfortunately, right now, as far as their vaccines. But, dogs is the big one. And I think what prompted looking at titers was the thought that the concerns with over-vaccinating, right? I think people used to think of vaccines as being extremely benign, right? That they're not going to be a problem giving over and over. And I think we know that may not be true. And I know in my practice lifetime, we went from every year, right? You took your animal in every year and you got a vaccine, to every 3 years, right? We've changed. The only exception when I was younger, and even when I was a young vet, was rabies, right? Because there were different, because that was legislated more than what's the scientific evidence. And when I was at Colorado State University for my residency, which is 25 years ago now, almost 30, I was the first time I started hearing some of the immunology folks there talk about, maybe we shouldn't be doing this, right? Maybe we don't need this. Maybe we're, I think as people learned more about immune diseases, right, where your body destroys something, people were really concerned about vaccines triggering that. And I think people still think about that, right? We hear, I think that's why some people are very against vaccines, both in people and animals. There's this huge concern about triggering autoimmune diseases or vaccines causing more problems than they're solving, blah, blah, blah. And so people started to look at, well, how long are antibodies? With the pandemic, people talk a lot about antibodies. How long are protective antibodies kind of floating around, right? That if you got exposed to a disease, you would be protected. I mean, the immune system is more complicated than just antibodies, but it was an easier thing to measure, right, to begin with. And so people started measuring them and going, wow, some dogs, they go a long time once they're adults, right? With these antibodies, plenty of antibodies floating around that would probably be protective. And yeah, it's only one part of the immune system, blah, blah, but that's good for us to know, right? Like these are around a long time. Some dogs fall short, some dogs are longer, but dogs, especially adult dogs that have had, a couple of vaccines over their lifetime, they can be really long-lived. Like sometimes they just got tired of measuring past 3 years, some of the vaccine companies, but dogs had high titers, right? So then we started to see those recommendations about every 3 years, people questioning how often we have to do it, and the development of an ability to measure titers commercially. Expensive at first, getting better, as far as cost-wise goes. The current thoughts on titers are especially, I think, if you have a pet, a dog that doesn't do well with vaccines, right? We all know there are dogs who have reactions to vaccination. The thought is, well, maybe those would be good dogs to at least look at their titers and see if they have an antibody level that would be potentially protective. And I think that is not a bad thing. I started to do more titers in dogs when I could, particularly starting with like parvo and distemper, right? And looking at that combination shot and saying, well, these guys are pretty well protected. They don't have a very good, they get sick or get hives, right? Or whatever kind of allergic reaction that they might have. And so we can feel a little bit more secure if their titers are adequate. That they're protected. And the titering has changed, the tests. There are some that you can do in-house now, which I never had available, which will say yes or no, like there seem to be enough antibodies. The very best ones are the more fancy ones that can take a few days, but they actually give you some numbers and some more specifics on titering. There's an older but decent article on the American Veterinary Medical Association site, so AVMA, and if you put in titers, there's a nice overview of some of the titering information, but like I said, it's a bit dated. Another good source for anyone listening, and I had to look this up too. I mean, I was poking around trying to see what the guidelines are, is at AHA, which is AAHA, which has a very, the American Animal Hospital Association, I always have to think about that. And it's small animal, right, oriented, so dog and cat. And they have some very more up-to-date discussion of antibody testing and when they even have recommendations on when they would do it. They have a really nice description of when you get an actual number, which has to do with dilution and is complicated, but that's called quantitative. You're actually measuring the amount of antibodies, and those are sometimes a little bit, those are what I'm used to when I was in practice, looking at those versus the newer kind of snap tests in-house, which are like yes or no things. And they also discuss, like, just because an antibody titer may decrease, if a dog has had a positive titer, it probably means they have a pretty good immune system, which means if they got exposed again, they might actually respond better than you think, because we know the immune system is not just antibodies, it's other stuff. So that's positive to know. I will be honest with you, I'm really tempted because my dog needs blood work and a heartworm to see where she would be. Now that's for the December. The rabies gets more complicated because, again, a lot of rabies stuff, recommendations, is legislated, can depend on how much rabies you have in your state. And I know that there were times that I did do rabies titers in dogs to see what it looked like. Sometimes we would run them if it was a bite case. They've bitten somebody, they haven't been vaccinated in a while. We want to see if they have where their titer's at. However, that often does not take the place, even if it looks like they're protected, of whatever legislation is in your state. So it may mean like, oh, look, I got a titer and it looks good for rabies, but that may not hold water in your state and get you out having to vaccinate your dog. So it's something which sounds kind of wishy-washy on my part, but it's one of those things you probably have to talk to your vet about. But those two places, particularly the AHA website, I thought was really good because they are really into vaccine guidelines. They do a really good job. They update them all the time, and they get a bunch of really smart veterinarians and immunologists together and talk about it. And they have these really, really interesting times. They actually have a list of indications now where they say, here's where you might want to test for titers. And it's really good.
If you want to hear more about Morris Animal Hospital, please check out at morrisanimalfoundation.org. I thought that was really interesting what Dr. Deal had to say, and that she's even going to be using it, because it's not something that you think of right away. And I always like to give out options to people because, why do put your pet at some risk when you don't have to? So, very, very good interview, and I thank her for that. I mentioned reviewing this wonderful book. It's called, and there's a long title, but it's called Griffin's Heart, Mourning Your Pet with No Apologies. And actress Reagan Pasternak wrote it. What I like about it, and it's about $30, but what I like about it, one is it comes in a kind of a cool thing, which becomes, I would say, kind of a keepsake for your pet or your friend's pet. And it's a workbook, actually. And as you read through, it's almost like you're talking with a friend. And she shares her feelings on grieving and working through the process. And as you go, there's exercises, there's journal exercises, there's things to think about. You want to have Kleenex with you when you're doing this. There's a placeholder so you know where you're going, where you're at in the process. But I think it would be a great book for anyone that's lost a pet and just wants to commemorate that relationship, as well as come to grips with the grief that you have. But I think it is also a wonderful book to give to a friend who has lost a pet too. So it's called Griffin's Heart, and Reagan Pasternak had it. And we did get a chance to interview her on KSCO Pet Radio. And I asked her some questions. And I thought I'd share her answers because I felt that she really, she doesn't have a psychology degree, but it comes from her heart, and I think you're going to appreciate it. So one of the questions I asked Reagan was, she has a son, and how would you talk to children about the death of a pet? And here's what Reagan had to say.
I've had to really do a lot of walking the walk, these days since I'm writing this book on it. So I just tell him to feel however he's feeling. He has been there now. We had to say goodbye to another cat recently who we've had for years and years, his whole life. That cat was with him. And then our dog who, one of the loves of my life as well, this dog Jed, who passed away 3 weeks ago, I guess now. And,
oh my gosh.
And we said goodbye to them both. The vet came here and we said goodbye. And so he saw how sad it made me, and I didn't pretend it didn't make me that sad. And he saw how much we loved Jed. And I know this sounds a little cheesy, but I use my own book on my animals too, just to commemorate them and feel like I've dedicated something to them, because they meant so much to me and they gave us so much. So yeah, I mean, he sees me, in pain, and he sees me knowing that I'm going to work through that pain. And I hope that's the answer to that. I just think they should see that life isn't supposed to be always squeaky clean and perfect. That's just not reality. And so he sees how much I miss him. I hope I'm missed when I go one day. So, so I don't know. That's how I'm just trying to lead by example for him.
Another thing I asked Reagan was, when it comes time for someone to to get another pet and they're ready for it, they feel like it's right. Do you have any words that you'd want to share on this? And I thought this was very well put. So here's Reagan sharing what she had to say about the time when it comes to get another pet.
Oh, I wish them so much luck and happiness, and I think it's amazing. If you feel ready, it's such a personal decision, but if you feel ready to open your home and your heart to another animal, remember, there's no comparing. It's going to be a whole new adventure. It's going to be a whole new love, which is amazing. And you're not replacing anybody. Just don't have any guilt. And if you're opening your home and your heart, then there is nothing wrong with that. If you saw my house right now, you'd see that I am constantly filling my house with poor animals. I have a giant 130-pound dog beside me, and I have a whole litter of foster kittens that I'm doing in the other room, and another dog and another cat. I'm all about, if you can give especially a rescue animal, if you can give a rescue animal a home, wow, it's amazing. It's such a good gift.
I thought this, I don't know, it touched me quite a bit. I know when Woofy passed, he was my demo dog, and I still, you get these dogs that are just so special, and you don't ever want to compare them to anybody else, but there is something about them that just makes you remember them a little bit more than others, and each one of them are so special, and their personalities and such, but there's always that one, and I think it would have helped me having this book. So anyway, you can get it on Amazon, about $30, $27.99 or so, but anyway, it's a good book. I did want to read something, why I think you should get it. And I'm not getting any money off of this. It's such a good book, I wanted to share it with you. She said, I started writing Griffin's Heart after the death of my soulmate animal, Griffin, as it was a way of healing my wounds and finding a meaning in grief. Through this process, I began to understand that the crushing weight of my loss was not unique to me, and that for millions of people whose pets are their family, there was a need for a compassionate and insightful resource. This book is everything I wished I'd had after my Griffin died, and it's my hope that readers will find comfort, insight, compassion, and hopes in the pages. Very well done. Oh, if you wanted to learn more about the book without buying it, you can get some information on www.grifffinsheart.com. And there's a lot of insights on there, and I think you'll enjoy, and maybe purchase the book afterwards. A lot of you were asking about this mug and these shirts that I've been wearing. Well, I have affiliated with an interesting group called DIG Direct. There's Dog is Good, and they have wonderful, wonderful apparel, dog treats, all sorts of things. And so you can check it out on my website at acmecanine.com/digdirect. And I think you might find some cool things there. So I love them. They're great quality. I love the things, and I hope you do too. So anyway, I wanted to let you know about that because I know many of you are asking about it. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. All the best.